Hey there, Transformers fans. Today we're going to be taking a look at the new adventure, the brand new adventure by Renegade Games Studios for the Transformers role-playing game using the Essence 20 system. That adventure is called A Time Is Now, where you as a crew of Autobots, fledgling Autobots, take on missions that potentially could take you into deep space and potentially into the prehistoric past. Rev up your engines of your alt modes and get your T-Cog ready to transform as you as the Autobots take on the evil Decepticons. Welcome back, folks. This is Nothing Ventured, Nothing Gained, and I'm your rules Arbiter Steve, here to bring you my opinions on the Transformers new adventure, the 4-part adventure called A Time Is Now adventure for the Transformers role-playing game system using the Essence 20 system, made by Renegade Game Studios. In this adventure, your fledgling players, it is a low-level adventure, your fledgling players are going to try to make a name for themselves and impress popular Autobot characters like Perceptor, RC, and Optimus Prime. Ooh. This generally takes place in the 1980s cartoon world of Transformers. You can use this standalone adventure after the Troubled Waters adventure, which can be found in the actual core rulebook of the Transformers role-playing game system, or you can use it after the Beacon of Hope. We had reviewed with this prior on our channel, and I'll leave a link up somewhere. There's something you might be able to click if you want to see that review of this adventure. But either one of those adventures are going to make your characters level 2, which is the perfect level. This adventure starts at level 2. If you happen to complete both of those and your players are level 3, you don't have to worry, because in the adventure itself, it gives you little tips and tricks on what you can do to make sure that the game is still going to be a difficult time and your players are not going to blow straight through it just because they have a few levels on the adventure. Gives you a couple of tips and tricks of what you can do if you need to use it, because just because they have an extra level doesn't mean it's going to be a cakewalk. Decepticons are conniving and mischievous. Ooh. As a disclaimer, before we kind of go any further, I did buy this book from Renegade Games Studios with my own money. I got this and the PDF. I use my own cash. They don't even know I exist. In the Time Is Now adventure, it is a multi-part adventure. It's going to take your characters from level 2 to level 6 at the end. And there's going to be 4 parts. Each part really feels like an episode ripped right out of the screen from the old 80s Transformers Generation 1 cartoon show. Almost to the point that you can almost hear that transition music happening. And they do have iconic characters that could potentially show up that you either have to battle or that some Autobots could potentially show up. You may even, hell, there may even be a Junkion coming up. So I am going to try to avoid spoilers for the most part, but I'll give a warning if I can't possibly avoid a spoiler. But like I said, we're going to try to do spoiler free all the way through, and let's see if I can meet that challenge. But before we get into the real meat of the adventure, what you're actually going to be reading, I have to give the props to the art direction that they took, because obviously they're heavily inspired because of the timeline that they chose to go with the main stories of the Transformers role-playing game. And you could do any story you want given the rules, but the story is really laid into just after the Autobots crash in the first episode of the Transformers TV show. So you can really tell that that's what inspired all of the artwork throughout the book. So let's going to take a quick look at the book here. And there's the front cover, as you saw here. It's the same with the physical book. And we're just going to thumb through a couple of the artwork images yet again, trying to avoid spoilers. And the cool thing is that the artwork doesn't necessarily even have to show Transformers to get that old 80s feel. As you see here, you see a potential Decepticon that may or may not show up until later in the thing, but this is more like GM tidbits. Got a lovely picture. You got a lovely picture of the arc yet again, all the Autobots and the Decepticons and all the Transformers that they do depict very much in that G1 inspired artwork. Get a lovely picture of RC going on here, using her laser dagger and her pistol. We've got a really awesome picture here of the Seekers. The Sharkticons, gotta love them. They're gonna chomp a whole bunch of stuff. I really enjoy the artwork. I think you're going to really enjoy the artwork. It really gives you a sense of this is great, especially if you're playing with people who like Transformers, who may have seen the Michael Bay movies, who may have seen some of the more recent cartoon adaptations of Transformers, who missed or weren't old enough, who weren't old enough to see or experience the G1 cartoons. Now, some people are like, oh, that's all outdated. But sometimes it's nice to go back and really see where the Transformers came from, either from the comics or from the original TV show. And while it is directly inspired by the 80s Transformers show era, whether that's comics at the time or the TV show, the Renegade Games Studios can really take liberties on the story itself, because the players aren't playing characters like Jazz, Moby, and Ultra Magnus, that they're playing their own characters. They're playing basically lower level or fledgling Autobots you may not even have heard of, because they're their own design. So because you're playing your own Autobots, and your own Autobots are basically the stars of your story, none of the other major Autobots went on this mission. So this mission basically happened while all the other Autobots are doing all the other stuff. And in between, maybe Perceptor chimes in and helps you out, or contacts you and gives you a little tidbit. Maybe RC ground bridges in to help you out because you all got defeated at one point. And it says that RC comes in with a couple of med packs and repair kits and heals you all up, in preparation to go to the next part of the mission. So it really lets you dip your toe in and make a reference to maybe things that have happened in the actual show or comic book, and also major characters that exist in the Transformers universe. But it allows you to experience that from the perspective of your characters and not really ruin the main storyline. Of if you know a lot of the lore about Transformers, you know that certain things happen at certain times, and like, wait a minute, how can he be here and over there at the same time? No, he just kind of chimed in. He maybe reported in to you guys. He asked you a couple questions and he dipped out, or maybe someone ground bridged in and they helped you out, and then they dipped out because they had another mission to go to, and they're charging you to the mission. You are trying to accomplish the mission, but as everything in the book says, they understand that you're a lower level. They understand that you're the fledgling people and they're the higher ranking Autobots. But they want you to come into your own, just like your GM wants you to come into your own at the game table. Now let's get into how, from a GM's perspective. So there might be a little spoilery thingy. I'll put something on the screen here. We're going to go a little bit into the first part, just because I really do appreciate how Renegade Games Studios designed the information for the GM. Now, I've read a multitude of adventures from D&D, Pathfinder, and a number, even Shadowrun, a variety of different games throughout my years of playing and GMing, that a lot of times these books, they lay out the information and they think they're doing you a favor by laying it out in a certain way. And they're laying it out for two reasons. One, they're laying it out in a concise manner so you can understand it, but they're also laying it out for space. And that's the one thing I'll say that this book does really well. It doesn't care as much about the page count. This book, let me take a quick gander. This book is 158 pages. If this was another company and another product, whether it's D&D or Pathfinder, I don't think this book is going to be this big. Because number one, there's a lot of artwork in here, a lot of artwork, because that's going to take up some space. But also the way they lay out information is nice and spread out. Sometimes they use a chart just so you can know what the players are going to be doing and how do you track their progress in some skill test that they're making. Maybe they all have to make at least 2 skill tests. Depending on how many they pass or fail, depends on what kind of information they get. Maybe there's a time where they're trying to catch up to somebody or trying to glean information from an NPC, and it lays out the questions and answers of that NPC. So you clearly know what the NPC knows and what, in paraphrasing, what they're going to say. So number one is the adventure layout. Let's open this up here. Is the adventure layout. This gives you a synopsis, and almost every product does this, but not that flowchart. That flowchart is awesome. It flows out. It's like, okay, first there's this event, and then this event, and this event. These events happen. The first those first three events, they happen. They happen in order, and you take as much time as you want to do them. And even says, you know, if things are starting to wind down, you push them along, or you let them kind of make their own way. Kind of gives you little prompts in there. And then sometimes the path will branch. Whether it branches and it becomes, you can't do the other branch, or sometimes the branches can loop on itself, so you can try to do both. That's really up to the players and how they want to do things. So sometimes an action that a player does may skip one of these events entirely. So it's a nice thing, a little branching flow chart, as also a little synopsis. This is one of the NPCs, and the questions and answers that they have for and they actually even go into this is a little RP session between one of the NPCs in the game that the Autobots are slated to protect, and then it's a whole question back and forth. So maybe the Autobots start with the first question. They start asking information about and they have a list of questions. If they receive a question, here's the answer. And they also have a list of questions that the NPC will ask a random Autobot, one of the players. So it's really nice that it's in there. They didn't have to make a chart for this, but it makes it clear of what the information is, where do I find it, and it makes it fast. And like I said, this does add to the page count, and it does kind of widen the book out a little bit, but I think that's to its benefit, not its detriment. And here, this is one of the group tests where all the Autobots have to make checks. There are certain checks that they have to make, and there's a list of skills that there's 3 different skills here that they have to make, and they have to make a cumulative amount of checks. And it tells you how many checks they have to make, and it tells you that they can't have one person do all the checks. They have to split out these checks among all of the players. So some players are going to be better at some of these checks than others, and maybe 1 or 2 of the Autobots are focused on completely something else, and they may not have a lot of these skill checks, but they still have to try. And it tells you how to delineate that down. Depending on your number of players, depends on how you have to break it down. So I really like the layout of the book. It literally gives you clear information of what you need to do, when an Autobot gets a bonus, where does that bonus take effect, because some of the bonuses are for later. It might say, if the Autobots fail this check, then this combat's going to happen, and they're going to be surprised. But if they succeed at this check, or if they have this piece of equipment, because it's possible that a certain member of your players may have a piece of equipment, it may bypass it automatically. Or if they make the check, they may be able to bypass the fight, or maybe they want to pursue the person. Maybe they see a seeker flying in the sky, and maybe one of them determines it's actually not a plane, but it's actually an evil Decepticon transformer flying around, and they may want to pursue them. So they'll actually start the fight, and the enemy will start a surprise. So it gives you a lot of information right at your fingertips, so you don't have to worry about, oh wait, hold on, what page was that thing on? I forgot that was 15 pages ago. I have to remember. You don't have to do that. You really don't have to do that with this adventure. There's less fiddling around with the book. That's what I really like about this, is less fiddling around with the book and more information right when you need it. Or it tells you specifically the section you're going to need it in, which usually isn't too far later past that point. But I will say this is my one pet peeve, and I mentioned this in, I think, my previous review of the other adventure, the Beacon of Hope, and it's this. Renegade Games Studios, I hope someone at Renegade Games Studios hears me. Make an interactive map. Or give me a map pack I can buy. Now, the one issue that Transformers as a game has, so your standard map for most people if you've never played role-playing games before, if you're playing D&D, you're playing Pathfinder, you're playing a very high fantasy game, which is a lot of RPGs fall into that category. Your maps are standard size around 24 squares by 32 squares. That's a ballpark number. Sometimes a little more, a little less, but that's usually your average. And that's because all the people are generally moving at the same speed. You may have the outlier of a dragon flying, whatever. But the problem is you're all Autobots. You're all vehicles of some description. Whether you're a plane, whether you're a speedy, a motorcycle, or a sports car, or even a big, semi-truck, you're all cars. And your car speed is a lot of times way faster than your land speed. So I can understand why the maps are bigger. I don't know how I'm fitting this on my table. And the second thing is, this picture's in the book. Sometimes, now let me flip to one that makes sense. This isn't a great example, but there are examples I remember in the other one, in the other adventures, where the maps in the book have the room markers on the map. As you see here, they have A3. So everyone knows if I printed this out and I blew it up and printed it approximately right size and laid this on my table, everyone knows something's happening at A3 because it's listed as A3. There's an A3 in the book. You don't need to know that, but you know that there's an A3 in the book. Something's happening in A3. Now, could I try to Photoshop that out and make it look okay? Yeah, maybe. Other people, maybe not. Maybe some people have way more skill than that. The point is I shouldn't have to do that. And also to the point, unless you're doing like a chase scene, and in essence, I wouldn't need a map for that. Unless someone's running away and we're actually doing these squares, like, I have 45 feet of movement, so I'm going to fly over here, and I have a 40 foot of movement, and I'm going to use this ability that makes me move faster. For the most part, we don't need the great distances for the maps. So if I were to draw this out, say I had some gaming paper, or I had like a big map and I could dry erase on it, I'm going to draw this map for a battle, maybe 2, and then I have to draw the next map for the next battle that we might have. And then some battles, maybe we might skip it because whether for time or whether the Autobots did something to skip that fight. Or maybe they didn't want to deal with it. Maybe they took a beating in the last fight. Maybe the next fight started and they immediately dip, they run away to try to repair themselves and recover. So I still feel that this is the weakest point of the role-playing game system. It's the maps. Either let us buy maps so we can fold them out, or at least give us like a PDF of just the maps where we can actually remove the GM markers. Like some of these maps, they have multiple GM marks on the map to tell the GM, hey, something important happens right here. Remember that. And when they hit the spot, go to this section in your book and go into that, and that'll explain what happens in there. So still my biggest pet peeve of the Transformers system is there's no easy way to get this map on the table. Now, I could draw it out, but yet again, someone spent a lot of time and effort drawing this map, and it really looks good in its facility with this dome on the outside. That gets lost if I'm just drawing out, a haphazard circle with a thing and people putting minis on the table. Because sometimes, like, I know my players, they like minis. They like to visibly see how many squares away they are. So look at the character sheet. The character says, well, I can shoot 6 squares away from me. And then the map says, I'm 7 squares away. I can't shoot you. I have to move first. So that becomes important for gameplay. Now, some people can do complete theater of the mind, and that's awesome. I'm not knocking theater of the mind. But for the people who want tactical combat on a map, this becomes a little rough because the maps are so large. But at the end of the day, once combat starts, things are going to get pretty close pretty quick. Especially if you're driving in at, like 45, 50, 60, 70 feet, at an action, you're going to get close to somebody or they're going to get away from you pretty quick. So I would love for this to be solved in the future. But that's my one biggest negative of it. It's still the maps leave a little bit to be desired. But that's just one person's opinion. How about you tell me what you think? Have you played Transformers role-playing game before? Have you looked at any of the modules, whether it was the Troubled Waters in the core rulebook, whether it was Beacon of Hope, or maybe you've already started playing at Time Is Now because it released a couple of weeks ago? And thanks for joining me today. Don't forget, if you like this content, give us a big old thumbs up. Also hit that big old subscribe button. And share it with your friends if you really like this video. But until next time, may all your die rolls be crits, and may you always roll max damage. Transform and roll out.